All right, so today we're diving into 10 absolutely timeless lessons from Islamic teachings. But listen, this isn't just going to be a list. We're going to see how all these ideas actually connect, how they form a real, practical blueprint for living a meaningful life. Let's get into it.
So let's start with a big question, and I want you to really think about this for a second. How can wisdom that's literally centuries old genuinely shape your life, right here, right now, in the modern world? It's such a crucial question because these teachings, they aren't just historical artifacts. They're living, breathing principles that are meant for today. So here's how we're going to break it down in 4 parts. First, we're starting with the foundation, which is all about knowing God. Then we'll look at the connection, the daily practices that build that bond. After that, we'll see how it all gets put to the test out in the real world, in society. And finally, we're going to zoom all the way out to understand the goal, the bigger picture of what this is all about. Okay, so first things first, the foundation. Before you can build anything, you need solid ground. And in this case, that starting point is a deep understanding of God's power. And, just as importantly, learning to place your complete and total trust in His plan. This is the bedrock that everything else is built on. Okay, this might sound a little random, but stick with me for a second. Think about a coconut. I mean, really think about it. How does pure, sweet, healing water get sealed up inside that hard shell, way up high on a tree? The lesson here is that it doesn't just bubble up from the dirt or the bark. It's presented as a direct sign of God's creative power, His ability to create something amazing, something pure, from a place you'd never expect. And that idea of divine power, well, it ties directly into how we're supposed to live our own lives. This beautiful saying uses the example of birds. They don't have a savings account or a pantry full of food. They just fly out every single morning, hungry, with complete trust that they'll find what they need. And they come back full. This is the perfect model for a concept called tawakkul. You do your part, you put in the work, but then you trust that the ultimate outcome is in God's hands. Okay, so if the foundation is knowing God and trusting Him, the next question is pretty obvious, right? How do you actually keep that connection strong? How do you maintain that bond? Well, that brings us to part 2, the connection, and it's forged through the daily acts of worship. Now, the absolute core of this connection is the 5 daily prayers, the Salaah. And this is so much more than just a ritual. Think of it like a built-in schedule for mindfulness that's woven right into the fabric of your day. From the crack of dawn all the way until the dead of night, this rhythm creates these consistent touch points, these moments to pause, to remember, to be grateful. And as you can see, each prayer has its own structure, a set number of units or Raka'ahs, which provides a steady framework for this vital practice. And what's really cool is how this connection extends beyond the prayer itself. There are these specific supplications or du'as that you can add on for really practical things in your life. Take this one, for example. It's for improving your speech. It was famously recited by the prophet Moses. The idea is to say it 11 times after each of the main prayers, which creates this direct link between your spiritual practice and your personal growth. You're literally asking God for more confidence and clarity in the way you communicate. And then there's this prayer. It's just so beautiful and universal in its humility. After you do any good deed, whether it's a prayer, giving charity, or just a small act of kindness, you recite this. It's a way of saying, I've done my part, now I turn it over to you. It's this humble acknowledgement that, hey, we try our best, but at the end of the day, it's the all-hearing, the all-knowing who accepts our efforts. It puts all the focus on our intention, not just the results. Right, so faith isn't just something you feel inside, is it? It's not meant to be kept in a box. Once you have that foundation of trust and you're building that connection through worship, you have to take it out into the world. And this is where the rubber meets the road. This brings us to part 3, the test, where our faith gets put into practice through our choices and our interactions with everyone around us. And check this out, what a stark and powerful contrast. This is all about our financial choices. On one side, you have this incredibly intense, symbolic vision of the spiritual consequence of dealing with interest, or riba. It's a serious warning. But then, on the other hand, look at the reward for a simple act of charity. Giving clothes to someone in need, the reward is God's protection for as long as that piece of clothing is being worn. It's such a clear lesson that our everyday choices have profound spiritual weight.
These tests of society can be deeply personal, and they go all the way back to the very beginning of humanity. The story of Adam's sons, Habil and Qaabeel, is just a timeless lesson on jealousy, anger, and the devastating consequences of our actions. After Qaabeel commits the first murder in a fit of rage, he's just lost. He has no idea what to do. But the lesson here is incredible, because it shows not only the origin of a terrible sin, but also that even in that darkest of moments, divine guidance is still there, as God sends a crow to teach him the simple, dignified act of burial.
Okay, so why? Why does all of this matter so much? The trust, the prayers, the daily choices, what is it all for? Well, that brings us to our final section, the goal. This is where we zoom all the way out to understand that this life, as important as it is not the final destination. It's a preparation for what comes next.
This analogy is wow. It really puts things into perspective. A mosquito's wing. It's basically worthless to us, right? The teaching here is that if this entire world, with all its treasures and distractions, had even that tiny, insignificant amount of ultimate value in God's eyes, he wouldn't even give a single drop of water to those who reject him. Now, this isn't saying life is bad. Not at all. It's just about getting our priorities straight, focusing on what's permanent, not what's just temporary. So what is that ultimate goal? It's paradise, or Jannah. But the journey there isn't always a straight line for everyone, and it's really about the purification process.
So the journey to paradise, especially for believers who sinned, is laid out in these clear steps. First, they might go through a period of cleansing in the hellfire, or Jahannam, but the key is that they are eventually removed. Second, and this is so important for justice, before they can enter paradise, any wrongs they did to other people in this life have to be settled and made right. And then finally, once that's all cleared, they're welcomed into their eternal home.
And what does that feel like, arriving at your final home? This description gives such a profound sense of comfort. It says it won't be strange or confusing. Instead, it's described as the ultimate homecoming, that believers will recognize their place in paradise with the same or even more clarity and familiarity as they knew their own house in this life. It's the ultimate feeling of, I'm finally where I belong.
So let's just recap. Let's look at the blueprint we've just laid out. It all starts with opening your eyes and acknowledging the divine signs that are everywhere in nature. Then, you build on that with a real active connection through daily worship. You take that connection out into the world, understanding that your actions have real spiritual weight. And you frame it all with a bigger picture, that this life is a beautiful, important journey, but it's a preparation for the next one.
And that brings us full circle, back to our first question. How can this wisdom shape a modern life? Well, it gives us a framework, a blueprint. So I'll leave you with this final thought. Looking at this blueprint, don't try to do it all at once. Just pick one thing. Which single lesson are you going to reflect on and try to bring into your life starting today?